I used to know exactly who I was in this house. The one who checked locks before bed. The one who packed lunches when no one else remembered. The one everyone trusted to hold it together. Then Toby looked at me 3 years ago and said the one thing I could never let myself hear back. I told him he was wrong. I told him it would never be that. I watched something in his face close, quietly, permanently, and I let it, because the alternative was admitting he wasn't wrong at all. Now I'm standing in the driveway of the house I grew up in, gravel crunching under my shoes, watching the porch light flicker on the way it always did, and Toby is walking out that front door for the first time in 3 years. He's not 22 anymore in my head. He's still the boy standing in my doorway saying he loved me and me telling him to never say that again. He stops on the top step. He looks at me like he's deciding whether to be angry or something worse. Nothing has changed, I tell myself. He's my brother. That's all he's ever been. I don't believe myself even as I think it. Welcome back to Nightfall BL Stories. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the beginning. I was 13 the day they brought him home. I remember standing in the hallway in socks, arms crossed, trying to look like I didn't care, and failing. He was 8, too small for his own jacket. Eyes that kept checking the door like he still expected someone to change their mind about him. "This is Toby," my mother said, like it was the simplest sentence in the world. "He's your brother now." I didn't know what to do with a brother. I didn't know what to do with someone smaller than me who flinched when the front door slammed. So I did the only thing I knew. I made him a plate of food he didn't ask for and sat with him until he ate it. He looked up at me halfway through like he wasn't sure it was allowed, someone being kind to him without wanting something back. "You don't have to be scared here," I told him. I didn't know yet that I was making a promise I'd spend the next 15 years trying to keep, in every way except the one that would have actually mattered to him. Years passed the way they do, quietly, until they didn't. He was 19. I was 24. He found me in the kitchen at midnight, the way he used to when he couldn't sleep as a kid, except this time he didn't sit across from me. He stood in the doorway like he needed the exit route. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish," he said. I remember thinking, before he even spoke again, that I already knew. I'd known for longer than I'd admit to myself. I just hadn't let the sentence finish forming in my own head, because if it finished forming, I'd have to do something about it. "I don't see you like a brother," he said. "I haven't for a long time, and I know what that makes me. I know what it makes this." I just couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel it. The silence after that lasted longer than it should have. Long enough that he started to fold in on himself, like he was already regretting handing me something this breakable. "Don't," I said. "Don't say that again." I watched it land. I watched him nod like he'd expected exactly that, like some small stubborn hope in him had been waiting to be proven wrong so it could finally stop hoping. He left for his apartment that night and didn't come back for 3 years. I told myself I'd done the right thing. I told myself that every single day since, and some nights I almost believed it. Which brings us back to the car, 40 minutes of highway, and the loudest silence I've ever sat in. Nora had claimed the front seat like a territorial cat, headphones in, definitely not actually listening to music, definitely watching us in the side mirror. Toby sat behind me. I could feel him there the way you feel weather changing before it happens. "You could have flown," I said, eyes on the road. "Would have been faster." "I wanted to drive," he said. "Didn't want to just show up. Wanted the time to think." "Think about what?" He didn't answer right away. In the mirror, Nora's eyes flicked up, just briefly, cataloging. "About whether I was ready to see you again," Toby finally said. "I'm still deciding." Nobody said anything after that. The highway kept unspooling in front of us, and I gripped the wheel like it was the only honest thing I had left to hold on to. The screen door creaked before I even had the car in park, and Nora's head popped out before the rest of her did, phone in one hand, the other already waving at both of us like she'd been counting down the minutes. "Finally," she said. "I thought I was going to have to referee you two through a window." Neither of us laughed. She noticed. She always notices. She looked between us, slow, deliberate, the way she does when she's cataloging something for later. Then she just said, quiet enough that it was almost gentle, "You too good?" "We're fine," I said, too fast. Toby didn't say anything at all. That was the first lie of the weekend. It wouldn't be the last one I told. The house hadn't changed. That was the strange part. Everything in my life had shifted underneath me, and this kitchen still had the same crack in the tile by the sink, the same photo of the three of us stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. Toby stood in that kitchen like a stranger relearning a language he used to speak fluently. Your room's still your room, I told him, because it was easier than anything true. Mom never touched it. I figured, he said. He didn't look at me when he said it. Nora appeared in the doorway holding a mug of something that was definitely not tea, based on the way she was hiding it behind her back the second she saw me look. Dinner's in an hour, she said. Mom and Dad went to get flowers for tomorrow. Which means, she added, dropping her voice like she was sharing state secrets, we have the house to ourselves, and you two are going to actually talk to each other. We're talking right now, I said. You're doing the thing, Nora said. The thing where you talk about tile and magnets instead of the actual thing. Toby's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. The first one I'd seen from him since he got out of the car. There's no actual thing, I said, too fast, the same too fast I'd used in the driveway. Nora looked at me the way she looks at a book she's already read the ending of. Okay, she said. Sure. She left. Toby and I stood in the kitchen, not talking about the actual thing. Dinner that night was easier than I expected, which somehow made it worse. My parents talked about the anniversary party tomorrow, the guest list, whether the caterer would remember Toby's dairy allergy this time. Toby answered when spoken to. I filled silences the way I always had. The family's translator. The one who kept things moving. Under the table, I could feel how careful we both were being not to let our knees touch. After dinner, my mother pulled a box down from a closet, old photo albums for tomorrow's party, and there we were, all of us, 12 years of birthdays and holidays laid out across the coffee table. Nora curled up beside the box like she'd been waiting all day for exactly this. Oh my God, she said, holding up a photo. Look how tiny Toby was. I looked before I could stop myself. Toby at 8, swallowed by that same navy jacket, standing half behind me in the frame like I was something to hide behind. You used to follow him everywhere, my mother said fondly, not understanding what she was handing me. Practically glued to his side. Toby went very still next to me on the couch. I didn't look at him. I didn't trust what my face would do if I did. He needed someone, I said quietly. Somebody had to be it. And you always were, she said, moving on to the next photo, not noticing what she'd just said, not noticing how Toby's hand had gone tight around the edge of the album. Later, while after the house had gone dark and quiet, I found Toby on the back porch, sitting on the same step he used to sit on as a kid when he couldn't sleep. You don't have to talk to me, he said, before I even said anything. I know this is weird for you. It's not weird, I said, sitting down anyway, a careful distance away that felt, for the first time all day, like it was costing me something to maintain. I just don't know how to do this. Be your brother, and also whatever we're supposed to be now. He looked at me then, really looked, in a way he hadn't since the driveway. I never asked you to figure that out tonight, he said. I just want you to stop pretending there's nothing to figure out. I didn't have an answer for that. So I sat there, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, and let the silence be honest for the first time all day. The silence held for a while before Toby broke it. Do you want to know when it started? He asked, still not looking at me, eyes on the dark yard instead. Because I've never told you. I never got the chance before you told me to stop talking. I should have said no. I should have protected both of us from it. Instead I said, yeah, I want to know. He nodded slowly, like he was giving himself permission. I was maybe 11, he said. I used to have nightmares. Bad ones. The kind where I'd wake up and forget for a second whose house I was even in. And you'd hear me, every time, before I even called out. You'd come in and sit on the edge of my bed until I fell back asleep. You never made it a big deal. You just showed up. I remembered that. I hadn't thought about it in years, but I remembered the exact weight of sitting on that mattress in the dark, half asleep myself, staying anyway. And the lunches, he said, a small, almost embarrassed laugh escaping him. You used to pack my lunch even after I was old enough to do it myself. You'd draw stupid little faces on the napkins. I kept some of them. I don't know why I kept them. You kept them, I repeated, something tightening in my chest. And then there was Marcus Hale, he said, and his voice changed, went quieter. 8th grade. He and his friends used to wait for me by the east gate. I never told you how bad it actually got. I never had to. You just knew, somehow, and you started walking me home every day without ever making it about protecting me. You made it look like you just wanted the company. I did want the company, I said, and it was true. It had always been true, even when I told myself the reasons were simpler than they were. The day he shoved me into the lockers, Toby said, You found out. And I have never in my life seen you that angry. You didn't even yell. You just stood between us, and he never came near me again. I remember standing behind you thinking, nobody has ever made me feel that safe in my entire life. He finally looked at me. That's when it started, he said. I didn't have a word for it yet. I just knew I wanted to be the kind of important to you that you were to me. And somewhere between 11 and 19, it stopped being about safety and started being about you. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Every memory he'd just handed me, I had lived through thinking I was simply doing what any decent brother would do. I never once let myself wonder what it looked like from where he was standing. I'm not asking you to feel the same, Toby said quietly, before I could speak. I just needed you to know it wasn't nothing. It was never nothing. We stayed on that porch longer than either of us should have. Neither of us moved to close the distance between us, and neither of us moved away either, which felt, somehow, like its own kind of confession. I should go to bed, Toby said, not moving. You should, I agreed, not moving either. He turned to look at me, and in the dark, with just the porch light catching half his face, something in me stopped fighting for the first time all weekend. I don't know which of us leaned first. I only know that for one suspended second, his breath was warm against my mouth, and every reason I'd built for 3 years to stay away from this felt very far away. The porch light above us flickered, the bulb finally dying the way it always threatened to, and in the sudden dark, headlights swept across the driveway. We broke apart so fast Toby nearly fell off the step. My parents' car door shut. My mother's voice carried across the yard, cheerful, oblivious, asking if we'd eaten enough at dinner. By the time she rounded the corner of the porch, Toby and I were sitting a full arm's length apart, staring at nothing, breathing like we'd been caught at something, because we had. She didn't say anything. Not that night. I should have known something was wrong the next morning by how quiet the house was. My father found me alone in the kitchen before anyone else was awake. He set 2 mugs of coffee down on the counter, one for himself, one for me, the way he'd done 1,000 mornings before, except this time he didn't sit down. Your mother saw you 2 last night, he said. No preamble. That wasn't his way. I felt the floor tilt slightly under me. Saw us doing what? I said, and even as I said it, I heard how guilty it sounded. She didn't say anything happened, he said carefully. She said it looked like something was about to. I didn't have a lie ready. For the first time in my life, I didn't have anything ready at all. He's your brother, Felix, my father said, quiet, not cruel, which somehow made it worse. Whatever this is, whatever you think it is, you understand what that means, don't you? What people would think, what it would do to this family. He's not my brother, I said, and the words came out of me before I fully understood I meant them. Not like that. He never was, not really, not the way you mean. My father looked at me for a long moment, something between disappointment and fear on his face, and it was the fear that undid me more than anything else could have. I need you to think very carefully, he said, about what you're willing to lose over this. The rest of that day, the house felt different. Smaller. My mother was polite in a way that felt worse than anger, the kind of politeness people use when they're deciding how to feel. Nora kept looking between the adults and me and Toby like she was trying to solve a puzzle nobody would explain to her. Toby found me in the hallway that afternoon, and for the first time since he'd arrived, he looked scared instead of guarded. They know, he said quietly. Don't they? They suspect, I said. Felix. His voice cracked on my name. I can leave. Right now, before the party even starts. I can tell them nothing happened, that it's my fault for reading into things, whatever they need to hear. I don't want to be the reason this family falls apart. And there it was, the exact thing I'd been afraid of since the night he first told me the truth. Not that I didn't want him. That wanting him would cost me everything else. Don't, I said. And for once it wasn't the same word I'd used 3 years ago to shut him down. This time it came out desperate. Don't leave. Then what do you want me to do? Toby said. And I had no answer. Because for the first time in 15 years of being the one who always knew what to do, I genuinely didn't. That night I sat alone in my childhood bedroom with the door closed, staring at the ceiling the way I used to when I was young enough to still believe every problem had a version of me responsible enough to fix it. I told myself the same thing I told myself 3 years ago, the thing that had worked then, or at least the thing I'd convinced myself had worked. He's your brother. Whatever this is, whatever almost happened on that porch, it can be put back in its box. You've buried harder things than this. I built the argument carefully, the way I built everything, brick by brick until it looked sound enough to stand on. Toby would understand. He always did. He would go back to his life, and I would go back to mine, and eventually this weekend would become a story I didn't tell anyone, not even myself. I almost believed it by the time I fell asleep. In the morning, I found Toby in the kitchen before anyone else was up, exactly like the night before, except this time I had an answer ready. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what my father said." Something in Toby's face braced itself before I even finished. "We should let this go," I said. "Whatever it is. I think it's safer for everyone if we just go back to how things were before." He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched something in him go very still and very careful, the way it had 3 years ago in that kitchen doorway. "Okay," he said quietly. "If that's what you want." It wasn't what I wanted. I told myself that didn't matter. The morning of the anniversary party, the house filled with the kind of noise that used to mean everything was fine. Caterers in the kitchen, Nora underfoot, stealing appetizers before they were arranged on trays. My mother directing flower arrangements like a woman who had never once suspected her sons of anything. I told myself the quiet between Toby and me since that morning in the kitchen was simply us going back to normal. I almost believed that too, until Caleb walked through the front door. I hadn't thought about Caleb Ferris in years. He'd grown taller, more sure of himself, the kind of easy confidence that comes from never once having to hide anything about who he was. He hugged my mother like family. He hugged Toby like something more familiar than that, holding on maybe half a second longer than a normal hello requires. "I didn't know you were coming," Toby said, and there was a warmth in his voice I hadn't heard directed at anyone all weekend. "Your mom invited me months ago," Caleb said, grinning. "Couldn't miss it. Besides, somebody's got to make sure you're still surviving family functions." Toby laughed. An actual laugh, easy and unguarded, and something in my chest went tight and unfamiliar in a way I didn't have a name for yet. "Caleb's staying in the guest room," my mother said, passing through with a tray. "Oh, actually, we're using that for storage this weekend. Toby, you don't mind him bunking in with you, do you?" "Not at all," Toby said, too quickly for it to mean nothing. Or maybe it meant nothing, and I was the only one making it mean something. I didn't say a word. I picked up a box of folding chairs and carried it outside so I'd have something to do with my hands. The party itself passed in a blur of names I mostly remembered and small talk I barely participated in. I kept finding my eyes tracking Toby and Caleb across the garden, the two of them falling into an old rhythm I'd never been part of, a language built from years of a friendship that existed entirely outside of me. At one point I found myself standing near the drink table doing absolutely nothing except watching Caleb's hand rest briefly on Toby's shoulder as they laughed at something, and I realized I'd been gripping a glass of lemonade hard enough to hurt. "You're staring," Nora said, appearing at my elbow with a plate of stolen appetizers. "I'm not staring. You're doing the thing with your jaw," she said. "The thing you do when you're trying really hard not to feel something." "I don't know what you're talking about." She looked out toward the garden, where Caleb was saying something that made Toby throw his head back laughing, and then she looked back at me with an expression far too knowing for 13. "You know," she said quietly, "you can't keep pretending you're fine every single time something happens with him. Eventually your face is going to stop cooperating." She walked off before I could answer, leaving me standing there with a warm glass of lemonade and the uncomfortable, undeniable feeling that my little sister understood something about me that I still refused to say out loud, even to myself. That night, after the guests had gone and the string lights had been switched off one by one, I stepped out to the garden to clear the last of the folding chairs and found Toby and Caleb there instead, sitting on the low stone wall at the garden's edge, deep in quiet conversation. I stopped in the doorway, half in shadow, close enough to hear without being seen. "He's different this weekend," Caleb was saying. "More closed off. Is everything okay between you two?" "It's complicated," Toby said. There was something careful in the way he said it, something that told me he wasn't going to explain further, not even to Caleb. "You know," Caleb said, quieter now, "if things are ever not complicated with him, I'd still be around. I never really stopped thinking about you, if I'm honest." I didn't hear what Toby said back. I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked back into the house, chairs forgotten, my heart doing something loud and unfamiliar in my chest. And for the first time all weekend, I let myself actually feel the thing I'd spent 3 years and one very long night convincing myself wasn't there. I was jealous, not confused, not concerned for my brother's sake. Jealous, plainly and completely, in a way that left no more room for the lie I'd been telling myself since that morning in the kitchen. I stood in the dark hallway with my back against the wall and finally admitted, silently, to no one but myself, that I did not want Caleb Ferris anywhere near Toby. I wanted that closeness for myself. I had wanted it for longer than I could keep pretending not to know. I hadn't actually left the garden the night before. I told myself I had. What I'd really done was retreat far enough into the shadows to stop being seen, not far enough to stop watching. So the next evening, when I went looking for Toby and found the garden empty except for the sound of quiet crying near the old stone wall, some part of me already knew who I'd find. Toby was sitting with his knees pulled up, face in his hands, shoulders shaking with the kind of crying that comes from holding something in for far too long. Caleb was crouched in front of him, one hand resting gently on his knee. "Hey," Caleb was saying, soft, careful. "Talk to me." "What is it?" "It's nothing," Toby said, voice cracking on the word. "It's clearly not nothing." Caleb's hand moved to Toby's face, tilting it up gently. "Is this about Felix?" Toby didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You deserve someone who isn't scared to want you," Caleb said quietly. "You know that, right? If he can't do this, I can. I've been ready to risk everything for you since we were 17. I'm still ready." He leaned in, slow enough that it could have been stopped, close enough that I stopped thinking and started moving. "Don't," I said, and this time the word came out of me like something breaking. Caleb pulled back fast. Toby's head snapped up, tear-streaked and stunned. I didn't explain myself. I didn't have the words yet, not in front of Caleb, not in front of anyone but Toby. I crossed the garden, took Toby's wrist, and pulled him up and toward the house, past my mother's confused glance in the kitchen window, up the stairs, into my room, and shut the door hard enough that the frame rattled. "What is wrong with you?" Toby said, yanking his wrist free, cheeks still wet, anger and confusion tangled together on his face. "I don't like him," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. "I don't like him touching you. I don't like you being that close to him." "Why do you even care?" Toby said. "You made it very clear what you wanted 3 days ago. You told me to let it go. So let me have this. Let me have someone who's actually willing to want me back." Toby dash. "No," he said, and something in him finally broke open. 3 years of careful patience giving out all at once. "I am so tired, Felix. I have been the only one pushing since I was 19 years old. I confessed first. I came back first. I sat on that porch and told you everything and let you decide it wasn't enough. I am tired of being the one who has to be brave every single time, while you get to stand there and decide whether or not I'm worth the risk. You don't understand, Dash." "Then make me understand," he said, voice breaking. "Because right now all I understand is that Caleb was willing to kiss me and you weren't even willing to try." The room went silent. I looked at him, really looked. 3 years and one whole lifetime of pretending collapsing at once. And I finally said the thing I had been building walls around since I was old enough to understand what it meant. "I don't want to see you leave again," I said. "I don't want to watch someone else get to want you when I've wanted you longer than either of us has had words for it. I have spent my entire life being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never asks for anything, because asking for something felt like it might cost me everything else. I am done being a coward about this. I don't care what my father said. I don't care what it costs. I want you. I have wanted you since before I let myself know what wanting meant." Toby stared at me like he didn't trust it yet, like 3 years of rejection had taught him not to. So I closed the distance myself this time. I kissed him the way I should have on that porch, without hesitation, without a car in the driveway to save me from myself, and he made a small broken sound against my mouth before he kissed me back like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission he should never have needed. The door, which I had not locked, chose that exact moment to open. "Finally," Nora said from the doorway, completely unbothered, arms crossed. "I thought I was going to have to watch someone else take him away from you." I found Nora on the balcony afterward, staring out at the last of the garden lights. "You knew," I said, joining her at the railing. "Not a question. Obviously," she said, like I'd asked something insultingly simple. "How long? Does it matter?" She glanced at me sideways. "Long enough to get tired of watching you both be idiots about it." "You're 13, I said. How were you the only one who saw this clearly? Maybe because I wasn't busy being scared of it, she said, with a shrug that felt older than her years. I studied her for a moment. This kid who somehow understood our family better than the adults in it. You're too clever for your age. Have you always known how we felt, before either of us did? She looked genuinely thoughtful for a second, like she was deciding how much to give me. Toby told me once, she said. Years ago. I wasn't even supposed to understand what he meant. I think he just needed to say it out loud to someone. He said he liked you. Like you liked you. I was maybe 8. I didn't really get it then, but I never forgot it. And you never said anything. It wasn't mine to say, she said simply. It was his. I just got really tired of waiting for you two to catch up. I laughed, actually laughed, something in my chest finally loose for the first time all weekend. Go tell Mom and Dad, Nora said, nudging my arm. Get it over with. I'll be right there if you need backup. I found my parents in the kitchen the next morning, the last of the anniversary decorations still scattered across the counters. The house quiet in that particular way it gets the day after something big has happened. My mother looked up first. She must have seen something on my face, because whatever she was about to say died before it started. I need to tell you both something, I said, and my voice didn't shake the way I expected it to. And I need you to actually hear it, not just wait for me to finish so you can tell me why it's wrong. My father set down his coffee slowly. Felix, Toby and I are together, I said. Not confused. Not a phase. Not something I'm going to bury again because it's easier for everyone else. I love him. I think I've loved him longer than I've had the courage to admit, and I am done pretending otherwise to keep this family comfortable. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. My mother's hand found the edge of the counter like she needed something to hold on to. My father's jaw worked, the same way mine does when I'm trying not to say the first thing that comes to me. You understand what people will say, my father said finally, quieter than before. You understand this isn't simple. I know exactly how complicated it is, I said. I've spent 3 years running from it. I'm not running anymore. He didn't respond to that. He picked his coffee back up, mostly untouched, and left the kitchen without another word. It wasn't a slammed door or a raised voice. It was worse, in its own way. It was silence with a shape to it. Toby came down partway through, drawn by the quiet, and stood in the doorway like he was ready to be sent away. My mother looked at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. Years of watching 2 boys grow up under her roof clearly rearranging itself into a shape she hadn't let herself consider before. You've always been gentle with him, she said slowly, to Toby, not to me. Even when you were small. I used to think it was just how you were built. Careful. I was scared, Toby admitted. For a long time. Of what it meant. Of what it would cost him. Of what it would cost this family. She reached for his hand, though her expression was still working through something complicated of her own. I don't know what to do with this yet, she said honestly, but I know what it looks like to lose a child to silence. I'm not interested in doing that twice. My father didn't speak to me again that day, or the day after. I told myself I hadn't expected instant acceptance, and mostly I believed that, except at night, alone, the old fear crept back in any way. The one that whispered maybe I really had cost myself everything by finally telling the truth. On the 3rd morning, I found him in the garage, sorting through boxes that didn't need sorting, the way he always did when he needed his hands busy while his mind worked something out. I'm not going to pretend I understand this the way your mother seems to be managing, he said, without looking up. But I've been sitting with something these last few days. I raised you to take care of the people you love, even when it cost you something. I suppose I never imagined I'd have to watch you apply that to yourself for once, instead of everyone else. That's not an answer, I said quietly. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's honest, and it's what I have right now. Give me time. I'm asking, not refusing. It wasn't everything. But after 3 days of silence, it was the first real door left open, and I'd learned enough that weekend to know the difference between a closed door and one that simply hadn't opened yet. Caleb left 2 days after the party, before things between my father and me had fully settled. Toby walked him out to his car, and I stood far enough back to give them privacy, close enough to still hear. I'm sorry, Toby said. For all of it. You didn't deserve to get caught in the middle of something that wasn't yours. Caleb shrugged, easy as ever, though something behind his eyes looked a little more tired than his smile let on. I had to try, he said. I've wondered about it for years. Better to know than to keep wondering. Are we okay? Toby asked. We're okay, Caleb said. And for what it's worth, I'm glad it was him. He clearly should have said something years ago, but I'm glad he finally did. He hugged Toby once, brief and genuine, and drove off without looking back, and something in me that had spent the whole weekend braced against him finally let go. Months later, Nora likes to tell people she called it before anyone else did, which is technically true and which she reminds us of at every family dinner, usually right as dessert is served, as if she's timed it for maximum impact. The day my father finally hugged Toby for the first time, properly, without hesitation, at a birthday dinner months later, Nora leaned over to me and whispered, "You're welcome," like she'd personally engineered the entire outcome from her position on the living room floor with a stack of manhwa and a suspicious amount of patience. Maybe she had. I've stopped underestimating her. Toby moved back to the city eventually, closer to me this time instead of as far away as he could manage. We are careful with this, not out of fear anymore, but because we spent so long not having it that we don't want to rush past any of it now. My parents still ask questions sometimes, awkward ones, well-meaning ones. My father calls Toby by name now instead of talking around him, which doesn't sound like much until you've spent 3 years listening to him do the opposite. I spent most of my life believing love meant being useful to everyone but myself. It took nearly losing the person I loved most, twice, to understand that being loved back was never something I had to earn by disappearing into everyone else's needs. Toby taught me that. He always knew it. I just finally caught up. I used to think love had to look a certain way to be allowed. Steady, simple, easy to explain to people at dinner tables. I know now that's not true. Sometimes the love that costs you the most to admit is the one that ends up giving you the most back. Toby and I are still figuring this out, one ordinary Tuesday at a time. But for the first time in my life, I'm not doing it from behind a wall I built to keep everyone else comfortable. If this story meant something to you, if any part of it felt like your own story looking back at you, that's exactly why we tell them. This one has ended, but there are more waiting. Subscribe to Nightfall BL Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.